Before I start the movie, I would like to tell you that we miss you, my friend. Our movie today is a state of sci-fi and mystery. All you have to do is be patient in the beginning to enjoy the end, and now fasten your seatbelts and get ready for the movie.
In the 23rd century, most of the citizens on Earth live below the poverty line, which is why many people end up accepting very dangerous jobs like mining, the military, and space exploration. To navigate through the universe, explorers use a system called a fan stream, which converts matter into a data signal and transmits it to fixed coordinates. All volunteers are given an Apex device built into their nervous system in order to use this current. New Bewit is preparing to start a new job with the West Coast Search and Rescue Team. Before he leaves, he and his pregnant wife, Lisa, share a sweet moment together, and Lisa presents him with a picture of the two of them along with a loving note as a lucky charm before kissing him goodbye. Later on in the West Coast Slipstream Division, the team gave Wit a standing ovation. The captain gets most of the team to head out, then right in front of Wit, he starts asking Dave about the jump he took because he noticed something strange in the logs that might indicate a sloppy jump. Dave dismisses it as simply a silly mistake. Suddenly, an announcement comes by saying that teams 14 to 28 should prepare to jump. The captain puts on a videotape of the jump and notes how the teams head to the mining site. Just a few seconds later, a few of the team members returned, and to everyone's shock, they were screaming in pain and terror, not to mention the blood dripping down their faces. An alarm is raised because the quarantine has apparently been breached. And when the doctors try to help the bleeding saviors, one of them starts shooting everyone. The captain, Dave, and Wit try to leave the room, but find the door locked due to protocol. They watch on screen bit by bit how every member of the team who has returned becomes violent and attacks each other, and soon bullets break through the walls and nearly hit the trio. For their own safety, they have no choice but to jump, even if the jump only mentions a site called Infini off the grid. Dave doesn't want to go because that's where the crazies just came from, but soon lockdown protocol starts filling the room with gas, meaning they have to jump or die. For some reason, the captain's Apex can't decode, so only Wit and Dave are able to jump in while the captain is left behind to die. Moments later, East Coast Central Command is in complete disarray with news of what's going on at Infini. The chief forms the search and rescue team and explains the situation to them. Infini is the most remote outpost in the galaxy and is known for the worst space disaster in history with 600 workers killed by a highly volatile mineral that can only be found on this planet. Because of this, Infini was shut down permanently, and a team was sent to investigate what happened. But an accident causes the deaths of all the team members except for one named Montoli, who painfully removes his Apex device to prevent headquarters from forcing him to jump again. Montoli is now planning to send a massive amount of dangerous metal back to Earth, so the team's mission is to go there to stop it. At that moment, news of what had happened reached the West Coast, where the 14th to 28th Divisions had been sent to extract Montoli as well. It is implied that everyone in the Western Division is dead except for Wit, who has been trapped in Infini for a week already due to time dilation in space. They also believe there is an airborne threat on the station. The team then proceeds to jump in and instantly appear in the Infini, only to find the place in utter ruin and frozen. The team immediately gets down to business by assigning tasks. Boxon and Jacklar have to find Wit. Menzies, Greenwich, and Kent has to search for the payload. Mannington, Huntington, and Captain Johansson will find the generator. As the team begins to explore, they find a massive amount of dead bodies around every room and hallway. Half of them died from the freezing temperatures, but they can't figure out why the others were killed. Eventually, Manzi's group finds the payload and begins working on the control panel as they wonder what exactly powers this section of the station. Meanwhile, Johansson's group finds a dead man with strange lumps sticking out of his neck that they cannot identify. Then they finally found the generator, and while Huntington set about repairing it, Mannings went to check out the surroundings. When he enters another room, he is horrified to see abandoned experiments using human skin and various body parts still hanging. At that moment, the generator kicks in, restarting the computer system, only to be replaced by a dark screen asking them, "Who are you? And you, what are you doing here?" To get a hunch as to who this might be, Johansson explains that they are here to save Wit, and this causes the fans to start steaming in the rooms and the station is shut down. Mannings is sealed inside the room by the experiments and has to watch how everything falls apart and starts dripping blood. Suddenly, the Boxon team finds a door that opens on its own to reveal Wit's exit from his lair. After that, Wit lifts the closed protocol and the team meets with him to hear his voice. Wit explains that he had to make sure that this team wasn't crazy like the others, and that the station has become a slaughterhouse. It is clear that the cause of all the deaths is some kind of infection that passes from person to person through the blood and causes them to rampage, which is how all the miners killed each other. Wit already tried to make his way back through the riverbed, but he fails and remains hidden in the ducts, where he blew out the outside vents, killing everyone in the station to protect him. Huntington asks Wit how to operate the station, so Wit explains that it runs on binary codes, which he understands. This makes the team wonder if Wit stops the payload, which makes Wit angry as he realizes the team was sent to get the minerals, not him. Jacklar steps in and calms Wit down, promising to take him home if he helps them first. Whit immediately gets to work on the computer and easily finds the payload, but to shut it down he'll need someone to go into the furnace room to force the override. Menzies volunteers, so Johansson sends Jacklar and Greenwich with him. Whit then tells the team to look out a window, and they discover that there are dozens of windmills powering the station. Moments later, the trio arrive at the furnace room and activate the override for Whit while discussing the families awaiting them at home. Wade immediately begins to stop the payload, and Huntington can't help but wonder if he's injured, but Whit swears he's not. When Whit finally initiates the override procedure, the alarm begins to ring, and Whit orders Menzies and the Grinch to turn off the fuse. The gauges don't work and the computer warns them of the impending collapse, but with Whit's careful instructions, they manage to shut it down safely. The team prepares to regroup, but suddenly Montoli appears and attacks Johansson with an axe. The team promptly shoved him wide and Mannings quickly knocked Montoli out with one simple blow. Next, the team tries to find medical supplies to tend to Johansson's wounds while Jacklar and Greenwich hear the commotion in communications, so they decide to go back while Menzies stays behind. Huntington and Whit do not want to help Johansson because they are worried about infection, but Mannings orders Huntington to join them. At that moment, Montoli reveals that he is not dead and attacks Manning, who struggles against Montoli until he can blow his head off. This causes Montoli's injured blood to splatter everywhere. The infection immediately begins to affect everyone, causing them to scream in pain and madness. Whit concentrates and manages to fight off the side effects before reaching communications to tell Menzies to hide. Then, Whit escapes and jumps through a huge chasm to get to the other side of the station, only to slip and fall through several floors. For a few minutes, Whit sees Lisa worry as she returns home, but then wakes up and discovers he survived the fall thanks to the infection. After vomiting, Whit hears a voice and realizes that a madman is after him, as Kent blames him for his teammates' deaths. A chase through the station begins as Kent continues to insult Whit, but just as he is finally about to find him, Jacklar suddenly appears on an utter rampage and attacks Kent, beating him to death. Whit stays hidden and waits until Jacklar goes to pick up Kent's gun. Moments later, Whit finds a lab and searches for a cure for the infection, to no avail. After taking some time to focus again and fight the violent impulses, Whit continues to look around and finds a body of research that reveals that the dangerous metal is actually a cryogenic organic parasite called primordial ooze. Their basic instincts are predators, which is why infected people take to the wild. Only people with advanced emotional stability are able to resist the infection, otherwise it spreads quickly. This parasite wants to be an alpha cell and can replicate any organic matter it infects, so with enough time, it can replicate an entire human being. Finally, the man behind all this research turns out to be Montoli. After much reading, Whit hears a strange sound and goes to check it out, but suddenly Menzies, who has been hiding in a closet, jumps on him. The two men struggle for some time and Menzies does not let go of Whit until he swears he is not injured and explains what happened. Menzies stares at the research and comes to the conclusion that the entire planet is a living entity, but only when it thaws. The parasite is unable to comprehend and only searches for the alpha among them to survive. There is no cure for the infection, and their only hope for survival is to return home. However, only Johansson and Huntington could contact HQ, and Johansson may already be dead. During their talk, Whit has to fight off the infection in an effort to take control again and Menzies becomes suspicious, but Whit swears it was just a cut he got when he fell. Whit and Menzies agree to search for Huntington and begin to discuss how to tackle the search only to be interrupted by Mannings suddenly breaking through the glass door. Mannings begins attacking Menzies mercilessly, so Whit points his gun at him to force him to stop. But Manning threatens to shoot Menzies to force Whit to drop his gun. Mannings then starts throwing a tantrum, complaining that he was only sent here to save stupid Whit, and says he can see Whit. After much shouting, Mannings prepares to kill Menzies, but Menzies and Whit remind him that he is a friend and that they have families back home. Mannings says everyone has a choice and decides to end things himself, which causes a portion of his own blood to fall on Menzies' face. The infection immediately begins to drive him insane, so Whit has no choice but to shoot him before he becomes aggressive. Meanwhile, Huntington wanders around the station while also battling an infection. Moments later, Whit begins to hallucinate and sees himself going on a rampage. He concentrates and runs the hallucinations away, but his eyes begin to redden. Then, he hears a voice and discovers that Huntington is recording a message to his family, apparently also fighting off the infection. Pointing his gun at him, Whit tells Huntington to take him home, but Huntington ignores him until he finishes recording his message. Then he explained that he had already called headquarters, they just had to wait 8 hours. This makes Whit worried because lab research said no one can last more than 2 hours. As time passes, Whit and Huntington slowly lose their minds due to the infection. They begin speaking nonsense and jumping from one emotion to another, including laughing like maniacs, screaming, and even threatening each other during an argument. Eventually, Whit got tired of waiting and decided to go to medical bay on his own. Meanwhile, Greenwich uses her medical knowledge and tries different ways to treat herself. When she looks in the mirror, she sees some guards growing on her back, showing the strange neck they saw earlier. Suddenly Jacklar appears, revealing that his arm has been strangely mutated. He approaches Greenwich and tries to kiss her as he promises to protect her, but Greenwich keeps him at bay because she is scared. Jacklar then asks about their baby, forcing Greenwich to admit that she had to abort herself in order to lose the baby because the baby was already infected. Hearing this makes Jacklar go berserk and attack her, but Greenwich fights back. Back at Wit's, he is having trouble opening the door, but Huntington appears and helps him. They make it to the medical bay and can figure out what just happened because the parasite is projecting images into their brains thanks to some sort of hive mind. Jacklar is dead, but Greenwich is still alive, so Wit asks her what she can do against the infection. Unfortunately, Greenwich believes the parasite is too clever and the only escape is death, then bids farewell to her mother and dies. The lack of hope causes Wit to begin to lose control again and his eyes become completely red. Huntington points his gun at him, but Wit defends himself and a fight ensues. After much struggling, Wit manages to walk out of the room, prompting Huntington to chase after him. Before he can be found, Wit jumps into a hole with a ladder, and Huntington discovers that the parasite is also on the ladder. After interacting with the parasite and also having its entire eyes reddened, Huntington also jumps into the hole, only to be ambushed by Wit. Another fight ensued, during which Huntington became even more frantic, and the two men traded blows as if they were invincible. Eventually they fell into a small pool of water and Wit managed to overpower Huntington before tying a hose around his neck to break it and kill him. Afterwards, Wit clings to a photo of Lisa to gain strength and goes to Mead Bay to find a scalpel and record a message for the parasite. He explains that his method is terrible for survival because by exploiting people's hatred, the parasite will only make them kill each other and they will not learn anything about humanity. However, if the parasite chooses to work with them, they can help each other. Wit then talks about his family and how everyone here wanted an honest job, which causes him to start seeing visions of the team and Lisa. With the photo still in hand, Wit ends his letter by ending things for himself. As Wait's message is played in a loop throughout the station, the parasite begins to cover all the bodies with its slimy metal. A mysterious pond is shaped with minerals and a human face appears on it. While this is happening, Wit's blood begins to trickle back into his body. Moments later, Wit wakes up without a single wound and is shocked to discover that the entire team is alive and well. The Mannings tell them the parasite is gone, and Wit checks the lab, where he confirms that all of the mineral samples are gone as well. The team cleans up and regroups at the control center, but no one knows how to explain what happened. Clearly upset by the experience, they all agree to lie and say they were incapacitated for a few hours by the stress. The payload is destroyed and they rescue Wit, so the mission is complete and they shouldn't have a problem going home to convince everyone not to come back to this place. 5 minutes later, the team prepares to return to Earth, but just before jumping off, Wit sees 5 humanoid figures made of metal, and one of them has his image. The parasite seems to have heard his advice. Then the jump begins and the team brings it back to Earth, where everyone panics. A group of doctors immediately surrounds them and asks them personal questions to ensure they are sane, also asking if they have been exposed to any dangerous pollutants. The team swears they didn't, but everyone gets checked anyway, and they all pass it in color except for Wit. Examination can't seem to read it, so the chief asks him again if he's been exposed. But Wit doesn't answer. Fortunately, the scan finally works at that moment and clears Wit out. Then the team learns that here on Earth only 52 seconds have passed. Afterwards, Wit returns home to reunite with Lisa, who immediately starts crying because they told her Wit wasn't coming back. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can see a video like this. Thanks for watching.
Baby,